Russia-United States relations refers to the bilateral relationship between the United States and Russia, two of the world's most powerful nations. The United States and Russia maintain diplomatic and trade relations. The relationship was generally warm under the Russian President Boris Yeltsin until the NATO bombing of the Federal Republic of Yugoslavia in the spring of 1999, and has since deteriorated significantly. In 2014, relations greatly deteriorated further due to the crisis in Ukraine. Russia's annexation of Crimea in 2014, differences regarding Russian military intervention in the Syrian civil war, and from the end of 2016 over Russia's alleged interference in the 2016 US elections and the 2020 elections. Mutual sanctions imposed in 2014 remain in place. Total naval strength: 603 ships. Total naval strength: 481 ships. Total aircraft strength: 4,163. Total aircraft strength: 13,264. Leaders of Russia and the United States from 1992. Official contacts between the Russian Empire and the new United States of America began in 1776. Russia, while formally neutral during the American Revolution, favored the U.S. Fully-fledged diplomatic ties were established in 1809. In 1863, during the American Civil War, brokered by American President Theodore Roosevelt, ended the Russo-Japanese War. From 1820 until 1917, about 3.3 million immigrants arrived in the U.S. from the Russian Empire. Most were Jews or Poles. Only 100,000 were ethnic Russians. The U.S. participated in the Allied military intervention against the Bolsheviks during the Russian Civil War since August 1918. Operating in the Russian Far East following the Bolsheviks' victory in the Civil War and the establishment of the Soviet Union at the end of 1922. The U.S., while developing trade and economic ties, was the last major world power that continued to refuse to formally recognize the Soviet government. The United States and the USSR established diplomatic relations in November 1933. The United States and the Soviet Union were among the four major allies against the Axis powers. During World War II, following the onset of the Cold War in 1947, the North Atlantic Treaty was signed by the US, Canada, and several Western European nations. In Washington, D.C. on April 4, 1949, a treaty that established the North Atlantic Treaty Organization designed to provide collective security against the Soviet Union. The first bilateral treaty between the US and Soviet Russia, USSR, was a consular convention signed in Moscow in June 1964. In 1975, the Helsinki Final Act was signed by a multitude of countries, including the USSR and the US, and, while not having a binding legal power of a treaty, it effectively signified the US-led West's recognition of the Soviet Union's dominance in Eastern Europe and acceptance of the Soviet annexation of Estonia, Latvia and Lithuania that had been effected in 1940. The act came to play a role in subsequently ending the Cold War. In the 1970s, 1980s, the USSR and the US signed a series of arms control treaties such as the Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty. In July 1991, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty was concluded. In the late 1980s, Eastern Europe nations took advantage of the relaxation of Soviet control under Mikhail Gorbachev and began to break away from communist rule. The relationship greatly improved in the final years of the USSR. On December 3, 1989, Gorbachev and the US President George H.W. Bush declared the Cold War over at the Malta summit. On December 25, 1991, the Soviet Union dissolved, and the Commonwealth of Independent States, a loose association of the former USSR's constituent republics, was formed. The USSR's Russian Soviet Federative Socialist Republic became an independent state that inherited the USSR's UN Security Council permanent membership and declared itself the successor state to the USSR. Relations between Russia and the US remained generally warm under Russia's President Boris Yeltsin and the administrations of George H.W. Bush on intercontinental ballistic missiles. The treaty was eventually ratified by both countries. Yet it was never implemented and was formally abandoned in 2002. Following the US's withdrawal from the 1972 Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty, Clinton and Yeltsin were personally friendly. Washington encouraged the rapid transition to a liberal capitalist system in Russia. Clinton provided rich talking points but provided less than $3 billion. And much was paid to American contractors. The Russians, aware of the Marshall Plan in the 1940s, had counted on far larger sums. Real anger was ignited by the rapid expansion of NATO membership in Eastern Europe. With the Cold War over, Russians felt NATO's original role was no longer needed. It feared its dramatic move eastward meant an escalation of NATO's historic role in containment of Russian goals. Russia stridently opposed the US-led NATO military operation against Serbia and Montenegro over Kosovo that began in March 1.